We're excited to have you, Mike. So have you listened to any of the podcasts?
I haven't. I haven't had a chance.
That's okay. That's okay.
I just did mine yesterday. I recorded mine with Al yesterday. That comes on Saturday night. So
Right. So I see you're keeping busy. So, Mike, the reason that I started this podcast is I'd like to know like the comics backstories. Like I have no
okay,
idea.
great.
Yeah, like I have no idea how you started comedy, why you started comedy. I wonder if you could just kind of dial it back to like the very, very beginning, like why even, how did this all start for you?
Right. Well, it's interesting. I love talking about it because it wasn't really planned out. Basically, I've been working as a counselor and a therapist since I was 20 years old, and I always was interested in the arts and acting and things like that, and did a lot of plays and stuff for kids. And I was in a play, Tony Maria's Wedding, and Mary and Mario's Mock Italian Wedding. I did those, and I wrote some plays, directed some plays for kids about drugs and alcohol, illiteracy, domestic violence, aging, gangs, racism, all these things. It was a not-for-profit I started. So I was always interested in combining psychology and the arts. So we had this. Well, then I joined an improv troupe. I wasn't working. I had a lot of time on my hands. I started studying improv. Not the art, not to be funny, but the art of improvisation, the art of taking available material and making something out of it. In fact, I wasn't taught to be funny. I was taught to not be funny. I was taught to just improvise. And if funny comes, funny comes. Well, then while I was doing that, I did try stand-up one time, a long time ago. My roommate back in college, Tom Agna, I used to watch him, and he was trying out for HBO, and then he became a writer, and he was on the Chris Rock show and Conan O'Brien, and I was always interested in it. And I did it one time at an Al-Anon convention. The first time I ever did stand-up for like 20 minutes, I got a standing ovation from like 1,000 people.
How old were you when that happened?
That, I was 26 years old. I just moved to Florida. I was dabbling with stand-up. They came to me with a convention, and they go, "Hey, you're a comedian. Why don't you try it?" I go, "Okay." So I took a day off. I wrote 20 minutes of material. I went on stage at this convention and got a standing ovation from 1,000 people, and I was like, "Wow, this is easy." But it was never that easy again. Never really did it again. But once I got into the acting and the improv, then I was in an improv troupe, and people were doing stand-up, and I started. One of the girls that was in it actually was friends with or dated Jimmy Schubert. And I don't know if you know, he's a big-time comic now. And I came back from a football game in Miami, and I went to Uncle Funny's Comedy Club to see him perform. And I watched him, and I thought to myself, I could do that. I want to do that. So I started doing open mics. I started entering into contests. And it was kind of weird because the people in the improv troupe were kind of anti-stand-up. They were more improv and stand-up. You know what I mean? It was weird. And so I started doing it, and then I won my first contest against all these other comics. And then I got the bug, man. I got the bug.
Okay, Mike, this is good stuff. So what I want to do is I want you to talk a little more about each of those journeys. Like this Al-Anon thing, we performed in front of 1,000 people. I'd like to know a lot more about that. Like, first of all, why did they ask you to do stand-up when you've never done stand-up?
I was hanging out. I had done one other thing for them at a conference in Boca Raton at the Boca Raton Hotel. My friend Tom.
What did you do? What did you do for them?
I wrote. Well, I went. They said, the owner said, "Hey, you're pretty funny. Why don't you introduce your friend, Tom Agna?"
Okay, got it.
And I wrote down 10 minutes of an introduction. I went up there. I had a 3-piece pinstripe suit. I looked like every time I put on a suit back then, everybody thought I was a hitman for some reason because I looked like the Italian hitman. So I went up on stage, and the theme was like a medieval theme. So I went up there and I'm like, hey, how do you like my costume? Because everybody was wearing costumes and I'm wearing a 3-piece suit. I go, how do you like my costume? I'm a medieval hitman. And, I got a laugh. But I worked in the field. It was all about treatment, alcoholism and chemical dependency treatment. And so there was a lot of changes going on in the field at the time with managed care coming in and everything. So I just started talking about managed care and insurance companies and treatment and how it changed. And then I did 10 minutes of that, and then I introduced Tom, who struggled, by the way, because they weren't his people.
Right.
They weren't.
Right. So, Mike, that was your first stand-up experience? You were a host of a show?
Yeah, I think that was the first time I actually went up and did stand-up, yeah.
Okay. Now, when you prepared for that, did you write out, like, punchlines? Or did you kind of say, hey, I'll talk about these couple of topics, and hopefully it turns out funny?
I thought it in my head. I pretended I was saying it up on stage. I pretended I was talking to an audience in my head. Then I would think of something funny to say, like I do when I'm around people. And then I wrote down on a little index card just the one or two words to prompt me about what to say.
Right. I get the sense from watching you over the last couple of years that I know you that that's the type of comic you are. I'm similar. I don't really practice the whole joke. I just kind of know where my punchline is and I work around it. Is that what you do?
Well, now I practice the whole joke because when you have the time, I was in an emergency situation there. I had to come up with something fast. But when I started doing stand-up and I was doing 10 minutes, 15, trying to get to 20 or 30, I would practice the entire joke, and every word mattered.
Every word.
Every word mattered. And I literally went up with a pad, like a reporter's pad, and I did my set list, went up, had it in my pocket. As soon as I got off stage, I sat down. I went over every one. I'm like, okay, this one worked, so I put a plus. This one needs work, so I put an arrow. This one, I didn't do, so I'd circle it. So I didn't do it. And every time I went on stage, I evaluated my set immediately after I got off stage. That's how I got the A material and the B material.
Okay, so that hosting experience, that was after you were in like those wedding things, those like Tony and Tina's wedding. That was after that.
No, I think that was before I ever did that. Yeah, see, I was living in Meisner Park. I was living in Boca.
Okay, so you had never done anything in front of an audience until you did that hosting MC bit?
Right, except for when I was a child. I was in 7th grade. The first time I ever got on stage, my teacher in 7th grade, they were doing a Christmas play, and she said, oh, you should play the father. And all I had to do was mime the part while the girls read that 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. And I was miming the part, and the only line I had was to laugh. So she goes, he was ripe and plump, a ripe jolly old elf. And I laughed when I saw him, and I was supposed to laugh, but I couldn't get the laugh to come. And when the laugh, so with this pregnant pause, and then when the laugh finally came, it was this psychotic, ridiculous laugh that made everyone laugh for about 30 seconds. The audience could not stop laughing. I actually have that tape somewhere. And I remember the feeling of making people laugh. Now, I used to do it on the bus. I used to sit in the bus, back of the bus, and would comment about what we were watching as we were going down the street. I would interject comments in class about what was up. So I was kind of doing it from the back. I never was in front, and that was my first time on stage. I was in 7th grade. And then afterwards, I grabbed the microphone while everybody was leaving, and I started doing my Elvis Presley impersonation. And everybody started watching that. And then other guys started grabbing the microphone, and they all wanted to do it too. And I have a picture of that, and I go, that's my first open mic. But I was an awkward kid, and I found that making people laugh made me popular. It made me feel good. And, that was my first time. So nothing since the 7th grade. Then when I got down here in my 20s, early 20s, I did that introducing my friend. And then I started.
Yeah, Mike, this is great stuff. See, this is what I'm going for on this podcast. Like, I love the fact that you could kind of trace it back to 7th grade. I mean, I just love that. And I was a kind of the back of the bus type guy too. Like I'm a comment guy at dinner. Like if we go to dinner, I probably talk the least, but I just throw my comments in there and try to get laughs. That's what I do. And same
Yeah.
thing, right? So I understand exactly what you're saying. It's a way to fit in, right, Mike? It's a way to fit in with everyone.
Yeah, and it was weird because I didn't. People think I like attention or I want to be the center. I don't like the attention. I do like making people laugh. I prefer to be like I prefer being in the back of the bus or in a meeting or someplace where it's supposed to be serious, and then I break the ice. That's what I prefer.
Yeah, I could see that. I could totally see that about you. Yeah,
you know, but then I go. Then you're on stage, and now everybody's looking at you, and I actually was very not animated, very low key, very almost it sounded like Stephen Wright. I mean, that was my delivery in the beginning. I never moved around. I was like very monotone. But basically, I got into the improv stuff because I never wanted to be an entertainer. That was never my goal. I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer, but my parents wanted me to be a stand-up comedian. No, I'm just kidding.
That's a great joke. It's a great joke. I laugh every time you say it.
I love that joke too. But so I never really thought it. But I started doing contests for the hell of it, and I kept winning, and I was hanging out with all these other way more talented people, way more ambitious people, actors and singers and dancers, and these stand-up people who had a lot more courage than I did. I thought they were all way more funny than me, but I kept winning contests, and I kept getting like positive feedback from headliners, and then they would give me guest spots, and then I remember one day I was hanging out at a club and the feature couldn't show up, and I was at the comic strip in Fort Lauderdale, and she's like, "Can you do 20 minutes?" And I go, "Yeah, I can do 20." I did that, and then another time at another club, Boca Nuts in Boca, I was about 3 years in, and I won a contest to be the house MC with me and Brett Ernst and Christy Murphy, and they wanted us to work for free, which I refused to do. I said, you have to pay something for what we do. But I said, can I still come to the club and do open mics? They were like, yeah, you're our best open micer. I'm like, okay. So I hung around comedy clubs. Again, one night, feature doesn't show up. Mike, can you do 20 minutes? I'm like, yeah, but you got to pay me. and they're like, okay. And then I got it. So I was starting to feature. And then what happened was my buddy, Al Romero, who I do my podcast with, anyway, just kidding. Anyway, so Al Romero wanted me to open for him, and there was this agent, Don Casino Productions, and they were going to be there. And he said, "Oh, you should come down." And they said they kept going to see other comics at other comedy clubs, but I kept popping up as a guest spot, and they liked me better than they liked the comic that they were going to see.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
So one day they called me and they go, "Hey, have you ever tried working on a cruise ship?" And I was like, "No." They go, "You want to try it?" And I go, like, "Sure." Oh, before that, the one thing I did do when I got into stand-up comedy is I started teaching for the comedy traffic school, Improv comedy traffic school. So I'm doing stand-up, I'm doing some counseling, not a lot, and I'm doing the wedding sometimes, and I'm doing the traffic school to make a living. And I got really good at doing that. Then I started my own school. So, and then I was working on cruise ships. So I'm doing stand-up, I'm working on cruise ships. I started my own business. All this stuff hit at the same time. And now I'm on cruise ships doing stand-up, and I did that for like 12 or 14 years. So I didn't even do a lot of the clubs and stuff.
Yeah, so Mike, after you had that MC experience, all right, you're 7, you got some good feedback, you had that MC experience. Your second stand-up experience was in front of 1,000 people. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, could you tell? Okay, so the guy asked you to do it. Was your immediate response like, "I can't do it, I'm not a comic"? Do you remember how that went?
I was like, I think I said, yes, I'll do it. And then immediately was terrified.
Yeah, so, okay, yeah, that's what I want to know about. Like, I want to know a little bit more about, like, what, from the time he asked you to the time you performed, what was that like? Was it a day? Was it a couple of weeks?
It was probably a couple of weeks.
Now, how much
I was so scared. I took the whole day off
I love
and went
this.
to the beach.
I love that. I love to hear this. Yeah, so tell me, why'd you go to the beach? Did you do it to be less nervous if you're swimming?
Yeah, I wanted to. I took a whole day off of work to prepare, and I went to the beach and I wrote jokes. It was about Al-Anon, and everybody kept saying, "What are you going to talk about?" Like my friends who'd never seen me do stand up, I go, "I'm going to talk about Al-Anon." They're like, "But you're going to be in an Al-Anon convention." I go, "Exactly."
Yes, exactly. So
You can't make fun of them, and I'm like, "Yes, you can." And I wasn't sure either. I'm like, "This might be the wrong way to go." Like, I should probably make fun of alcoholics and addicts, not make fun of Al-Anon.
right.
So I went to the beach. I wrote all these jokes. I literally, they showed a thing. It was the theme of this convention was Sail to Serenity. And I was sitting there with wearing my Capizios, my whatever shirt I had, my suitcase or my briefcase. And they showed a bunch of slides. And I have this video. I still have this video. And she goes, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna do some comedy about recovery. Coming to the stage, Mike Panzeca." And I went up there with my briefcase and I held it up and I went, "I have some slides too I'd like to show." And they started laughing. And I was behind the podium. I had notes, so I wasn't standing there. I had my notes.
Okay.
And I stood behind the podium and I read off my paper and I shared my jokes and everything crushed. Everything crushed.
How long did you do?
20 minutes.
Okay, before you got on stage, how nervous were you?
You know what happened? I was terrified. You know what happened? I was backstage in a room, one of the rooms, and I was hanging out with these kids from Alateen, teenagers whose parents were alcoholics. And I was hanging out with them. And they're like, "Who are you?" I'm like, "Oh, man, I'm Mike. I'm going to be doing comedy." And they're like, "You're going to be great, man. You're going to do great." They were like teenagers were pumping me up.
I love
in the
it.
back.
I
Like,
love
"You're
it.
going to be great."
I love it. It
Thanks,
helps.
man.
It helps your confidence, right? It helps.
It helped. These kids were like so cool because they were talking about feelings for the first time. They were dealing with adversity, and they were brave. I actually said that on stage. I said, I was backstage hanging out with the Alateen people, and their courage gave me courage to come up here and do this for the first time.
I love that.
That's awesome.
But
So-
see, that's why I love about your comedy. Your comedy is really real, and even on your first time on stage, you made it real. Like you didn't just do.
Yeah.
You just didn't do jokes that from Google. You connected. That's what you do on stage. That's why you're so good.
Thank you. I mean, I think that's the only way to do it, and that's what I teach people in my class. It's like, talk about real stuff that's real to you. Like, you got to connect with the people, And anyway, but it's scary. It's scary.
Yeah. So Mike, if that didn't go well, and let's say you really bombed, do you think there's a chance you might not be doing comedy today? I mean, having 1,000 people give you a standing ovation, that's good for like 2 years, right? I mean, that's like hitting a golf ball.
Yeah.
What do you think about if you would have bombed there? How any different trajectory on your career?
I think if I would have bombed, I don't know. It could have went either way. I could have said, "Oh, I got to do better."
Yeah.
Or I know what I did wrong.
Right. Okay.
Or I would have just gave up. If it kept happening, I probably wouldn't have done it. But it happened, and I just kept getting positive responses. But I lowered the bar too. I didn't try. I knew. If I was doing a guest spot, if I was doing 5 or 10 minutes, I just focused on that 10 minutes. And I can make people laugh for 10 minutes. I can do that. I have these 5 good jokes, and I can, do it. So, yeah, I don't know what would happen with me. You never know. Like sometimes that might have motivated me to try harder. I don't know.
Yeah, I could see that about you. So, Andrew, do you have any questions right now? What are you thinking about? Are you thinking about anything for him? Because there's a lot of good stuff here.
Not at the moment. That is really. I'm trying to wrap my head around it.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
So how good is it if 1,000 people are giving you a standing ovation, Mike? I mean, and how old were you when that happened?
26.
I mean, that's unbelievable. How good a feeling is that? You remember that to this day, and it's interesting. You remember telling jokes on stage in 7th grade. That's really amazing that you still remember that
cool,
moment.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I remember. Well, every once in a while you look back on your life and you reflect, and you're like, how did I get here?
Yes, that's right, right. So that's what we're trying to do. Like, so
Yeah, how did I get here? Like I wasn't one of these guys. This all happened by accident. Like none of this was really in the plan. It was a side thing.
right. No, there was, so you started after you did that little comedy experience that was amazing. You started at these improv weddings and you joined the improv group. Was that then the next step?
Yeah, but I didn't do it for a while. I didn't do it for a while. I actually took the improv class for psychological reasons. For my clients, I wanted my clients, because improv is how you take available material and you make something out of it. And what my teacher, Stuart Sullivan in Miami, taught me was there's a million ways to do things. There's rules of improv, like listen and yes and unlimited possibilities and no consequences. So it was like if he saw us getting into a scene that we were like all getting into, he'd be like, all right, stop, throw it away, do something else. So he was constantly making us stop and do something else. And also I was in an improv troupe, and with him too, I was taught to operate at the top of my intelligence. Don't go for the easy laugh. Don't get blue just to make people laugh. You don't have to be blue to make people laugh. Just improvise. Don't worry about being funny. That's why I tell my students, don't try to be funny. Just be yourself.
It's great advice.
Great,
that's what when I taught a couple classes, that's what I said. Don't worry about the funny. Just tell me about yourself. So this improv, how long did you do this improv? Did you do a bunch of improv shows? Get on stage in front of people and do improv?
You know what's funny? I went to the rehearsals, but never got on stage.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
I went to the shows and never got on stage. I went to all their shows. I helped load the band on the supporter troupe, and they're like, that was called Panzeca. That we had these weird names, and they said, Mike, one night at rehearsal, they're like, you got to get on stage.
Well,
like,
why weren't you?
I'm not ready.
Why weren't you getting on stage? You didn't want to?
I was terrified.
Really?
I didn't think I was good enough. I was insecure. I was still in the phase of my life where I had to look cool, and they were really good at being silly, and I wasn't. I was into being cool.
I totally
And
understand.
they were very into being silly and free, and I was still kind of insecure. So they made me get on stage and do a scene in a car with a girl, and I started doing it, and then they started making me do it, and they were laughing, and they used to do impressions of me. They would do like impressions of me doing stuff. They thought I was funny, and I was like, oh. And then when I broke away and started doing stand up, one reason I did that too was because I didn't always agree with the choices other people made in improv. And when I was in plays like Mary and Mario's Wedding, I would interject a line here and there, and the director or the owner would be like, yeah, that's not in the script. I go, I know, but
it's funny.
Did you hear everybody laughing? He's like, yeah, I know. He goes, but it's not in the script. I go, I know, but did you hear everybody laughing? He's like, I know. So that's why I started doing stand-up, because I'll be honest. What really happened was this is the big change. This is what actually made me decide to do it. I saw the movie Lenny Bruce with Dustin Hoffman. And I said, you know what? I want a job where I can say whatever the heck I want. And I decided to be a stand-up comedian. That's it. I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. And one day I decided to be a stand-up comedian. And I ran into a girl in the elevator across the street. I was looking for an office for my business, my not-for-profit thing. Her name was Liz Farron. I go, oh, she goes, what do you do? I go, I'm a comedian. I've only done comedy like twice, right? I go, I'm a comedian. She goes, oh, no way, me too. I'm like, really? What are the chances of that? And when we became friends, we started doing comedy together, and then later on we admitted to each other, both of us, that we had only done it once or twice and decided to be comedians. She was in the same stage of her life that I was in my life. And so we used to go around, and she was a bartender, so she would get a lot of people to come.
So you had those, you were a host, you did that big show, you got 1,000 people, then you were doing improv comedy, whether it be at the wedding stuff or at that improv group, and then you went back to stand-up comedy. Is that the progression?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so tell me now, what was the what's the best thing that happened to you that made you a good comic? 'Cause you started doing comedy full time now, because a lot of people give me a lot of different answers to this. So, what was the most valuable training for you?
You know what it was?
What?
It was improv comedy traffic school, teaching traffic school for
Okay.
4 hours from 6 to 10 with people who are angry because they got a ticket and making them laugh for 4 hours in traffic school was probably the best training. And I did that 2 or 3 times a week.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. What? So is it a regular traffic school, and you made it funny, right? It was just tell me about what is that?
Right. It started, Bud Friedman at the Improv in L.A. started it out there in California. And what he did, it was so people get a speeding ticket, they got to go to traffic school so they don't get points on their license.
Right.
That started in L.A. Then it came to Florida, and somebody said, "Oh, you should try this out." Some of my friends were doing it. I go, "Okay." So I taught the class, and as I was, you go to this thing, they teach you about the thing, and then when a few weeks later, when you think you're ready, you call, and the guy goes, "You're the only one that called." Okay, and he goes, "Can you teach tonight in Miami?" I go, "Okay," and I went up. It was on a 2-hour break. I was taking a break. I'm walking off the stage, and he goes, "You are," and I thought he was going to say fired. I thought he was going to say fired. He said, "You are the best teacher I've ever seen. Here's the keys to the front door. How many classes can you teach?" And I was like, wow. So the improv, so what happens is you get a speeding ticket. It's a basic driver improvement course. It's 4 hours. So basically, Bud Friedman started it in L.A., and then they had it here in Florida, and I worked for them for like 7 years.
Well, Mike, it's not designed to be funny, that class, right? You just made it funny because you were the teacher, right? I just want to understand this.
Right. The material is licensed by the state.
Right.
The curriculum is licensed by the state, but the teachers were supposed to be comedians. And I was actually one of the only few teachers.
I don't understand, why were the teachers comedians? I didn't even never knew that before. What does that mean?
Because traffic school was a good business and made a lot of money. So they were trying to figure out, how do we get people to come to our traffic school instead of someone else's?
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, that's interesting.
It was a niche.
Are they still doing it?
Well, I did work for them for 7 years, and I started my own for 5 years, and then the internet started teaching classes online, which I have, and kind of everybody started copying it, started getting watered down.
Okay, so that's a fascinating. Oh, so I understand exactly what you mean when you say that was an invaluable comedy experience. But could you elaborate on why that was so good?
Well, because I was taking a painful situation and turning it into fun. I was interviewing people. I was asking them, "What'd you get a ticket for?" "Oh, really? What kind of car you drive? What kind of music?" And I was trying to figure out, how do I convert that, proper following distance is 1 car length for every 10 miles an hour speed, and then make that funny. And then I would be dialoguing with them, and something would come out of my mouth that was funny, and then I would keep it for the next class. And I actually have a lot in my act today about that kind of stuff. So because I had 4 hours of nobody interrupting me, I was in control for 4 hours. It was my playground.
Right.
It was.
So 4 hours.
It was me.
How many days a week? 4 hours. 3 days a week?
About 3 days a week, I would teach a class.
So that's 12 hours a week. So that's 48 hours a month you were practicing comedy, right?
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. It's just about doing it, right?
That's right.
That's the bottom line.
You're actually right. Who else gets that opportunity? People get what? They get these 10 minutes here and there, 10 minutes here and there. And that's the other thing. What happened was I kept trying to start rooms around town. I started a room here, And then one of the club owners was like, you can't do that. You're competing. I go, well, I don't want to ask you for a guest spot every weekend. I felt like I was bothering people. So I started my own rooms, and we would always hire a headliner to close the room. But the comedy club owners were getting mad, one in particular, and said, you're ruining comedy because you're putting on these shows. And, I had my friends, me and my 3 friends, and then a headliner. And so I said, well, I need a job where I can do comedy. So then the comedy traffic school thing fell into my lap. So you're right. That's 4 hours, however many, the math was.
Mike, just think about this. 48 hours a month times 12 months out of the year times 7 years. I mean, people don't get up that much on stage in their whole career. Just think about how many
Yeah.
hours that is. So how would a new comic now get great stage experience? I mean, how does anybody get good now?
Well, you know what? That's what when I see people ask that question on Facebook. I saw somebody ask that question once, and I said, I would try to get a job where you can be funny at work and practice and make money while you're working on your stand-up. And that could be, like, I was lucky. Comedy traffic school, that was lucky. But a bartender or a teacher, something to do with communicating with people, teaching something, running meetings, event planners, like anything where you have to interact with people and make them have a good time. Anything like that is going to help your comedy.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Like, I know what helped me a lot was I used to host an open mic every Sunday in Long Island, and it went from like 8 to 12, and I hosted it for 4 hours every Sunday. And, you can't get that type of an experience 5 and 10 minutes here and there, because, I mean, I was so bad and so good sometimes that I got to, work out the stuff. But that's great. That's great advice, Mike, though, really. Just getting in front of people consistently. A teacher might be a great thing for a comic.
Even
right?
sales, anything where you're interacting with people and trying to make them relax. Even a waiter can do that.
Yes.
I mean, I've worked places where they wanted you to be like that, like anything where you're interacting with people. Really, there's any job, even a cashier could do that. You know what I mean? Like, as long as you're trying to interject some of your comedy into your situation, then you're gonna learn from those experiences.
Okay, so Mike, tell me about the cruise ships now. No one that we've interviewed has actually done any cruise ships at all. Could you tell me what is that like? Number one, for a first time thing, like to do it, and how is that different than doing the clubs?
It's first of all, back then it was actually kind of looked down upon.
Really?
I remember Simon on America's Got Talent or whatever made a comment about somebody one time, and he said, "You're like a cruise ship comic," which was a criticism.
Right.
It was a put down.
Right.
And so I didn't realize how lucky I was to get it. Everybody wanted it, and so it was great. I mean, they fly you places. You're on a ship. You're going to Mexico. You're performing in front of a large theater with professional sound and lights and thousands of people at a show, and it was great. It was probably over my head. I mean, I probably wasn't ready, but I had to figure out how to get ready.
So Mike, on a typical cruise gig, did you have to perform, twice out of the 5 days? How does it work?
Well, back when we first started, it was you had to do like a 20 to 30 minute clean show in the main lounge with another act. So you might work with a magician or a juggler or something like that. And then you had to do a 45-minute R-rated show. So you would do one clean and one R. And that same thing happened to me there. I did a clean show, and the main cruise director of the whole Carnival Cruise Line fleet said, "You're great. You did great." And the guy said, "You did great. How much can you work?" And next thing you know, I'm getting plane tickets mailed to my house for the next 12 years. So
that's amazing. That is amazing, Michael. But did you have to perform every night on the cruise ship? Is it like a every night thing? Or is it just one night?
No, you
5?
might do one night. And then you would do another night. So like 2 nights. But then it changed. They changed it because stand-up became the most popular thing on the ships. So they started doing 5 30-minute shows. They had actually a Punchliner Comedy Club. I forget the name, Lopez, and they used his name to kind of promote it. So you had to do 2 clean shows and 3 R-rated shows, which was hard because I was like, I don't have that much material. I don't have 150 minutes
right.
of
That's
material.
a long time. That's what I was thinking. That's exactly what I was thinking. That's a lot of material.
Yeah, no, they're like, well, you know what? You can repeat some of the material. And I'm like, not really, because they're coming back to see you. If they like you, they're coming back to see you, right? So I was like, so it forced me. So I had two different clean shows. That was okay. And I had two different R shows. That was okay. But that fifth show was the challenge. And the better you were, the more people came to see you. They already saw you.
That's right.
So what I ended up doing that fifth show was a lot of new material, old material I haven't tried, or a lot of crowd work, a lot of messing with the crowd, which people like, by the way.
Yeah, if it's done well, it's really amazing. So, can I ask you what kind of money the cruise ships were paying back then, and what do they pay now? I have no idea.
It was good. It was like, I remember it used to be like a daily rate. Like they paid you by the day because of travel. So they pay for the flight, taxi, food, and all that stuff. You probably make about $250 to $300 a day.
A day, okay, right. So if you're on 5 days, okay.
Yeah, then it became like about, I think it was like $1,250 to $1,500, depending on how good you were, your payments, and how long you've been around. About $1,500 a week, $1,500 a cruise,
Now,
and you could do up to 2 cruises a week.
So, like right now, are cruise ship audiences tougher than like a comedy club audience? It doesn't matter.
Well, it depends on, like, Carnival had like 24 ships, so, and a different itinerary. So if you got a cruise out of Miami to Nassau, like 3-day cruise, you got a different demographic.
That's right.
Financially.
That's right.
If you got a 7-day cruise, people with more money, older. So the demographic was determined by the itinerary, I would say. They're known to be hard. Now, Carnival is kind of a family, fun, get down and dirty, have fun kind of place. So that was middle America on those. The other cruise lines, you get your more upper echelon people, and also a lot of foreigners. I mean, at least Carnival was a lot of Americans. Like a lot of the other cruise lines, you're dealing with a lot of foreigners and rich people and old people. So it's a bit of a challenge. It depends on the cruise line and the itinerary.
Okay, so did you find it harder to do cruise lines, or it was just like any other gig? Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not.
It was easy. The challenges was the traveling.
Right.
The challenges was coming in and out of the country all the time. The challenges were people running, like cruise directors sometimes, and people didn't know what they were doing, or they didn't like you, or they give you a bad, one complaint, and then it gets back to the office. Well, he said this, and a lot of that kind of stuff going on. A little more scrutiny, I'd say, than you can't. It's not like a comedy club where you can do whatever the hell you want. You do have to, and you had to be able to be clean. Like you had to do 2 clean shows,
right.
So that a lot of guys could do that, or a lot of clean guys couldn't do the R-rated shows.
I could see that too.
So they would just do the clean material and then throw a few F-bombs in there and call it the dirty show.
So fast forward to today, Mike. Do you still? What are your nerves like before you get on stage on a typical show? I find it fascinating that some guys still get really nervous.
It depends. Like if it's just a regular show and I know it's going to be set up right and it's like it's all that stuff and nothing weird's going on, my nerves are medium.
Medium. Okay, so I actually thought you were like at a 0. Like you're medium.
Oh no. I still get nervous because anything can happen. I mean, I've had enough experiences now where, like, I've had a girl break up with me before I went on stage, on the phone, like 5 minutes before I headline a club, which I learned. I actually had one of the best sets I ever had in my life. And I learned, okay, that's done. Okay, I now know that you can have a good show when you're having a bad experience.
Yep.
Actually do better under adversity. So
you gotta have to have people break up with you every time you get on stage to do well.
Now, before, when I first started there, dude, I was like this. I was like, because now I'm moving up, I'm actually getting spots. I'm getting paid spots, and I would ride by myself. I'd spend half the day getting ready, getting dressed, like the whole ritual, like, what I'm going to wear, get the attitude, drinking my coffee, listening to Metallica on the way there. My girlfriend would be like, can I go with you? I'm like, can't ride in the car. You can meet me there.
Really?
And if you do see me, you can't say anything about our relationship to me. You can't bring up a problem. The only thing I want to hear from you is, you look amazing. That is all I want to hear. like anything to beef up my, confidence. I remember once another big turning point was when I was doing open mics at Christopher's in Fort Lauderdale. I was backstage with my notes, and my girlfriend at the time ripped my notes out of my hands. She's like, "You're a professional. You know this. Now get out there and do your thing." She took my notes away, and I was scared, and I went in the bathroom, and I was like, "You are funny. You're the funniest dude I've ever. Everybody here wants to have sex with you, bro. You are amazing. You're hot. You're sexy. You're funny." I'm doing this in the bathroom in the mirror, right? And I went on stage and I crushed. So the lesson there was, it's confidence, man. You have to own that stage when you get up there. And I always compare stand-up to sex because it's kind of like laughter's an orgasm in the brain. And if the person you're having sex with is confident and comfortable, you're going to be confident and comfortable. And everyone relaxes. And when you relax, you can have pleasure. You can have joy. But if you're on stage and the audience is worried about you, they're not relaxing. They're not having fun. They're not going to laugh. So you got to own that stage when you're up there. You have to have fun. If you're not having fun, nobody else is going to have fun.
Yeah. I mean, after all your stage experience and working on Carnival cruise ships, like, to know that you get nervous makes me feel better as a comic. Because sometimes before I get up there, I'm like, why am I so nervous? Like, I don't want, I want it to go well, but it seems like it's out of control. Like, I can't control the nerves sometimes.
Well, there's so many. Yeah, I think you should be nervous because think about it. There's so many moving parts and uncontrollable variables. You're dealing with a live audience. You don't know who's in that audience. You don't know who they are. You don't know what's going to happen. You mix alcohol into that equation. You don't know what's going on. You might forget something. What if everything is live? I compare it to going up to the batter's box in baseball. Let's say you got a home run yesterday, or last time you went to bat, you won a home run. This up the bat is a totally different situation. It's you're only as good as you are right now up at the. It's just like getting into the batter's box in baseball. That's how I always felt.
So when you prepare for a show now, Mike, let's say you have a show on Saturday and it's Monday, do you mentally or physically prepare in any way with notes or anything, or do you read jokes in the mirror? What do you do anything?
Not anymore. If it's a special show, like I know the demographic is going to be, like an older community, and I know how much time I'm doing, and I know who I'm working with, and all that. I'll be like, okay, what am I going to do tonight? I might sit down for 5 minutes and just do my set list, just to get it. Okay, once I organize it once in my head, I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to do, and I might have it in my pocket just in case I forget or whatever. But pretty much not too much preparation. Yeah, not anymore.
Okay. Also wanted to ask you, Mike, I know you bombed. I mean, everyone bombed. Do you have like a really bad bomb memory that just sticks out in your head? You'll never forget it?
Yeah. It was...
Everyone says, yeah. Yeah, I do.
It was a bad choice that I made. It was weird. It was... Carnival Cruise Lines started this thing called the Carnival Comedy Challenge. They were allowing people who wanted to work on cruise lines to compete in these competitions, and if they won, they got to be on ship. So I was already working on the ship, and all the big wigs were there, who I never met, and they asked me, "Well, did you do some time to kind of warm up the crowd, whatever?" I'm like, "Sure, I'll do that." And so right before the thing, the guy's like, "Okay, you're going up first. No F-bombs, don't insult anybody, and and you have to get judged." I'm like, I got to get judged. They're like, yeah, you're in the judge. Now, two of the judges, one was a former owner of a comedy club who I was involved in a lawsuit with, and his brother.
That's great.
The audience consisted of a bunch of cruise directors who's already seen me 100 times, and a bunch of new comics that want my job, and they're friends.
How many people were in the audience?
Probably, like, I don't know, like 80 to 100 people.
Okay, small crowd, but it's enough. Okay.
It was at the Improv in the Hard Rock, and Oh my God. Oh my God. I remember my friend Al Romero was like, Mike, next time someone asks you to do that, ask yourself, what would Al Romero do? Like, you already work. And plus, the club owner guy came up to me the day before because I did a Q&A. This is the same guy, by the way, that I was telling somebody earlier when I did my one-man show in his club. He was in the back going, he's not ready during my show.
That's great.
But he goes, are you competing? I go, I already work for Carnival. He's like, you work for Carnival? I'm like, yeah, I've been working there like 5 years.
Not anymore.
And that was the joke afterwards. Like, everybody was like, okay, whoever wins tonight will get Mike Panzeca's schedule. And
so
dude.
How much time did you do?
So I went up first, no warm up.
Okay.
I went up for about 3 minutes. I'm getting no laughs. I'm realizing that these jokes are not going to work. I don't have any that are because everyone's seen me a million times. And I was just like, I bailed early. I was like, when they turn on the pink flamingo, that means your time is up. I'm like, turn on the flamingo. I'm done. I go,
put on the flamingo.
And here's why I wanted to do it.
You lighted yourself.
I wanted to do it because I was thinking about being a cruise director. So I wanted them to see me and make me possibly a cruise director. So at the moment, I was really only there for that. I was there. Somebody else was supposed to do it and canceled. I helped out. Paul Remy was one of the other guys. He did fine. And the main thing was, everybody else did great. And I did terrible. Dude, I wanted to kill myself that night. That was the worst. And I had just gotten a fight with my girlfriend and came home to my instant. The messenger was said on there, you suck. It had nothing to do with the show, but she just coincidentally decided to tell me I sucked. So it was a bad night. My friends were like really worried about me. They're like, Mike, I was worried about you that night. That was the worst experience, dude. I hardly ever bomb, though. I can't say it. Like, other than that, and that's because of the situation, the circumstances, I really don't bomb.
I believe that.
I might have a dry spot, but I will find a way to get that off.
I totally believe that, Mike. I think, I've seen a lot of comics down here, and I just haven't thought much of them are very funny. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong guys, but you're just really naturally likable, and it looks like you're having a good time up there. And so I think I could see how you probably don't really bomb. What do you see when you watch comics that makes you cringe now? When you see a comic, whether he's in the business, he's doing it 1 year or 20, that you just hate. What do comics do that you think they do wrong?
Do something really obvious, easy, or get too critical with an audience member, like get mad. I don't like when they get mad at an audience member, like, I don't know, like, because, it's supposed to be comedy, we're supposed to be having fun, like, I don't think it's good when that happens. I also think the comic probably feels that way afterwards, too, but there's that, and then just people who think they're funny, but they're not, and they can't tell that they're bombing, or someone who blames the audience, like, or keeps acknowledging that jokes aren't working. Like, you don't have to, act like you meant to do that. You know what I mean? Like, I meant to do that. Like, you don't have to acknowledge everything that doesn't work. It just makes everybody, because how many times that'd be great if it only happens once, but what if it keeps happening? How long can you do that? You don't, you gotta be, the less you care, the better you're going to be.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that I find the best comics are the ones who just let it flow. Whatever happens, happens. They're fine.
I just saw an interview with Mike Piazza and Howard Stern about how he wasn't very good, and then he was going to get kicked out of the league, and they're like, look, man, if you don't, like, Tommy Lasorda got him drafted and everything to somewhere, to the Marlins, and it was like, look, if you don't do good this year, you're not going to play. He was making like $850 a month. And he goes, you know what? I got nothing to lose, so I'm just going to go out there. And he started working out and beefed up a little bit, and he hit all those home runs. And then he was talking about how when you got nothing to lose, like, see, I had something to lose at that Carnival thing.
Yes, that's a very good analogy. That's right.
I had something to lose. I already have the job. So why would you do another job interview? Or I already was found not guilty. Let's do the trial again. Let's make sure. Come on.
Yep.
You already have the job. You don't want to do that. You already have it. Like, there was no reason for me to put myself in that situation. It was a terrible situation. It was a terrible choice. But that was it. But, yeah, I guess when people, like, acknowledge the show's not going well, or they try to act like a comedian instead of just being themselves,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like insincerity, like that kind of stuff I don't like.
Yeah, I hate when a joke doesn't work and the comics like looking around like you guys are supposed to laugh at that. You know, I hate that. That drives me crazy because
And then it makes the audience feel obligated.
yes,
and
yeah,
feel like
yeah.
it's like having sex with a girl going, what do you mean that doesn't feel good?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like,
it's
what?
weird. It's weird. So we're almost out of time. Andrew, I think, wants to ask you one question, right, Andrew?
Yeah, I got one.
Okay.
So you've been doing comedy for a while. Looking back at your career, would you have done anything differently?
Yeah, I think I would. The whole thing was about, do I stay in Florida, do I go to New York, or do I go to LA?
Right.
And I did go to New York with another comedian, a female that I was dating. And we broke up, and I came back. And that's really when I threw myself into stand-up, and that's when I started just like, you know, whatever. She didn't want to be a comedian anymore, and I'm like, I'm going to be a comedian. I think I should have stayed in New York, because I've had comics come up to me like Rich Voss and Jim Quarantine, these guys like, dude, when you were up here doing that, why didn't you tell me? I would have helped you. Like, I probably should have stayed in New York, but I had the business, and I probably needed to make a decision. Do I want to starve in New York and try to be a comedian, or do I want to make a living? I was trying to make a living in Florida, but do stand-up in New York. I think I should have probably tried harder. Like, I had a chance to be on The Tonight Show. I had a guy that wanted to put me on The Tonight Show, and I didn't believe him. And he said he was friends with Donald. He said he was friends with Donald Trump and Jay Leno and Larry King, and I didn't believe him. And he kept calling me. And then I was watching TV one night, and I saw a picture with him of Larry King and Donald Trump and Jay Leno.
You dumbass.
Wow.
I didn't promote myself well enough. I lacked confidence. I didn't take it serious. I treated it as a hobby. I really, I probably could have parlayed it into a much bigger career than I did. I mean, I don't have regrets, but I don't regret it. But if I look back and answer that question, I would say I could have done more. I should have tried harder.
It's easy to see that now when you're a little older, but when you're going through it, you just don't even know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're happy. You're paying your bills. You're having fun. You're like, cruise ships did nothing for my career, by the way. Cruise ships are great for making money and working and everything, but nobody on land knows who you are.
Right.
And when you get off the ship, like when I wasn't on Carnival anymore and I had to work in comedy clubs, nobody knew who I was because I wasn't working any clubs,
You weren't in the circuit. You weren't in the circuit.
Yeah, I guess that's what I would have done differently too, is not put all my eggs in the cruise basket and worked on becoming a headliner in comedy clubs more on my own like that. I guess that's what I would have done. I moved out to LA or stayed in New York. That would be good. That's something I would recommend if I look back.
Well, you're still a young man, Michael. You could still be on TV and sitcoms and stuff. I still think you can do it.
Absolutely.
I'm working on something today, right now. My friend and I we've been working on it for 2 years, and I do a lot of things on Zoom, and I got my podcast, but this other thing we're working on it for television. So this is my chance to take my own advice and and it's done really well. I mean, they got all the right equipment, all the right sounds, pictures, and cameras, everything. And it's my chance to shine and do my thing, and it's perfect for me because it's a show. I'm a host, and it's comedians and people call in with problems, and we use comedy to solve the problem.
That sounds great.
My psychology
That sounds like
background.
fun. That sounds like fun.
And it's right up my alley. I know about psychology, I know about counseling, and I know about comedy. And it's perfect for me. That's why they're making me the host. So, that's going to be my opportunity to do that. But you're right. There's still things I could do. So I'm young enough to keep doing that. You're right.
Yeah. So Mike, thanks so much for taking the time out. We usually take about a week. We'll edit this out so it's nice and crisp. But you did a great job. I found it fascinating. Thanks so much for joining us. We think
did you like it? Was it good?
Yeah. We think you're a great comic and you're an interesting, nice person. And You're nice. Stay humble. That's what makes you great.
Oh, thanks, brother. You guys too, man. That's why I didn't even hesitate to say yes. know?
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, it's amazing. Like the really good comics are humble, and I find like the comics who are not good, they're like cocky, which is a weird kind of dynamic.
Yeah, that tells you something. It tells you something, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you have a nice humble way about you, even though you don't need to be humble. So thank you so much for taking the time.
You got it, buddy. Thanks, guys. Good to talk
to you
to
soon.
you.
Take
See
care.
ya. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye bye.